Good morning. Will you all please join me in Gospel? The countless great bodhisattvas of the land of happiness have reached succession to Buddhahood after one lifetime. Entering the compassionate activity of Samantabhadra, they unfailingly work to save beings in the defiled world. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. Morning, everyone. So today, this was one of the hymns by Shinran, and today we're going to focus on Samantabhadra. How many of you have heard of Samantabhadra? All right, great, 0. I think is what I'm seeing. No problem. So, Samantabhadra is a great bodhisattva in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition. Kind of putting us in context. So even though we focus in this tradition on Amitabha Buddha, as Sensei reminded us last week during Hanamatsuri celebration, we also respect all the Buddhas and all the images, all the bodhisattvas figures that there are in Mahayana Buddhism. So although our path is quite focused on Amida here in this temple, we're still part of the larger Mahayana tradition in the world, the largest Buddhist tradition in the world. So I wanted to talk about bodhisattvas a little bit today. I'm going to talk a little bit about Samantabhadra, but I also want to kind of ask what lessons Samantabhadra has for us in this world that we're in today and the challenges we face. So last year, I don't know if folks remember, February of last year, I had to look at my own notes. So if you don't remember when, I talked about Kannon Bodhisattva. So probably the most famous image of Bodhisattva that you might see. So if you remember these slides, right? So Kannon on the far left, you can see Amida Buddha, and then next to Amida, often in paintings, that's a Japanese image, you find Avalokiteshvara, it's the Sanskrit name, and Mahastamaprapta, which is the two. So they're paired with Amida. So Avalokiteshvara is very important. Kannon in Japanese, a lot easier to say too. So if you remember, and I talked a little bit about how Shotoku Taishi on our altar, we can think of them as Kannon. And also how Shinran and Eshini both had visions of each other as Kannon. Right? So in their marriage, like they literally, the Bodhisattva was in the middle of their marriage, the qualities and aspects of that Bodhisattva. So that's what I talked about last year. This year, and maybe I'll talk about some more folks, I'm going to talk about Samantabhadra. I'm going to try to use the Japanese pronunciation because it's a lot easier. We're a Japanese temple, Japanese Buddhist temple, so Fugen is the name of the Bodhisattva. It means universal virtue or all-pervasive goodness. And I'm going to think about that as we think about this as kind of an archetype. Bodhisattvas as archetypes for our life. So here's an image, a classic image. The slideshow started with one, but here's a classic image. Samantabhadra is often portrayed seated atop a stately, majestic elephant. In the scriptures, it says the elephant has 7 legs, but artists don't paint that. I'm not sure why. I mean, artists will paint Avalokiteshvara with 1,000 arms, and sometimes, occasionally, you see Fugen with 18 arms, but the elephant has always got 4 legs, and usually 6 tusks. I'll mention that in a second. Often the elephant is smiling. Samantabhadra is an embodiment of bodhisattva practices, solemn and serene, a state to which we all aspire. But the elephant is often like smiling with a wide smile and kind of, representing that. So Samantabhadra Fugen, within Mahayana Buddhism, there's an infinite number of bodhisattvas. And as we've talked about before, all of us here who are on the Mahayana path, we are all bodhisattvas. We're actively striving to live a life of causing less suffering for ourselves and for others, to increase the well-being of ourselves and others. That's ultimately what bodhisattva is about. That's their life mission. In addition to all of us, in addition to all the Buddhists around the world, there are 4 kind of main bodhisattvas that are quite famous. And you find them across cultures. You find them in Tibetan Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, Vietnamese, Japanese, Korean Buddhisms. The first is Kannon, talked about. The second is Manjushri, who is associated with wisdom. You'll know Manjushri because Manjushri rides a lion and has a sword. So if you see that. And the sword is the sword of wisdom that cuts through our deluded, ignorant, foolish views of things. It's the wisdom that makes us realize, oh, things aren't how I thought they were, right? Things are not as bad as I think they are, or I'm not as bad as I think I am, or anything like that, any kind of view we have. And then there's Jizo, widely beloved in Japanese Buddhism. So I know a number of folks here have spent time in Japan, either visiting or living, and I'm sure you've seen Jizo, often stone, bald head, little red bib usually, and they're often kind of childlike. You find them all over the place, and that's because Jizo is traditionally associated with with death rituals, because he wanders through hell and protects people, brings people out of the suffering of their own views, brings people out of metaphysical hells. But he's also, in Japan in particular, a protector of children, of women, and of travelers. So you'll see him all over the place. So look out for Jizo. We have one in my front yard. Under a beautiful maple tree, got a little Jizo statue. So anyone who's traveling will see him and then get protected. So that's Jizo. So Fugen is often paired with Manjushri with Shakyamuni Buddha, right? So last week we celebrated the birth of Shakyamuni Buddha for Hanamatsuri. He is the historical Buddha, right? The Buddha was born in what is now Nepal and taught Buddhism. He is the person who spoke the Pure Land Sutras that are the core of this tradition. And he is often, if he's portrayed with his side people, his attendants, they are Manjushri, you can see on his lion, and then Fugen on their elephant. And so you find images from around the world of Fugen. This is one from Japan. It's a little hard to make out in the light, but hopefully you can see. There's the elephant. Here's the Tibetan version. And then here's a modern Chinese version. So it's a kind of more modern style, right? You might see this in China or Vietnam. Samantabhadra, these four bodhisattvas, they were founded in Indian Buddhism, but they really grew up in Chinese Buddhism. And in China, there's a mountain associated with each of these four bodhisattvas. And you can go visit the mountain, and it's considered their place of practice. Dachang, or in Japanese, dojo. Right? The modern Japanese word dojo comes from a Buddhist term. It's originally a Buddhist term about a bodhisattva or Buddhist place of practice where they engage in spiritual activity. And so Mount Emei in China is where you find Samantabhadra, or Fugen's place of practice. It's the tallest of the four practice mountains in China. I don't know if you can make out the people at the base of that stupa. They're very tiny. That's the red carpet that goes around it. And that's me at the stupa. I was able to visit there when I was with PLP students. It's in Sichuan, so southwest China. It is amazing. And it's foggy there like 320 days out of the year. So there's this effect you're supposed to see, like pilgrims go there to see, it's called the Buddha light. There's a shadow from the structure of the peak of the mountain that, like, if the fog is just right and the light is just right, you actually see like a shadow of Buddha's head with a halo around it. I didn't see it. It was very foggy. Very foggy. Very foggy. So why am I talking about Fugen? Right? So again, in the hymn that I read to you from Shinran, he refers to the activity of Samantabhadra as the kind of paradigm of bodhisattva practice, as what it means to be a Buddhist, what it means to practice. We've been talking about this in class, Sensei's been talking about it here, and then in the Dharma school they've been talking about it. The reason why Fugen's elephant has 6 tusks is it represents the 6 paramitas. What are the 6 paramitas? Sensei's, I think, halfway through. He's doing the whole year. What's one of them? The perfections. Dana, which means what in English? Giving. Shila, which is discipline, ethical conduct. Yeah, someone said virya. Virya, so working hard on the Bodhisattva path. Kshanti, which is patience and forbearance. Dhyana, meditation, and prajna, wisdom. So even though those aren't central to Pure Land Buddhism and to Jodo Shinshu, they are an explanation of what it means to walk the Bodhisattva path. And in much of Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, from the time of India onward, Samantabhadra, Fugen is an example of what it looks like to do that. So they are seen as the kind of exemplar practitioner that we as Buddhists can think about and aspire to. They also have a list of 10 things. Remember, it's Buddhism, we love our lists. So he's the Bodhisattva of practice and vows. And there's a very famous text, a verse text, in which in 62 verses he lays out 10 vows and says, this is what my practice is. We lost the 10 vows. Can you go back one slide? Yeah, I think because the formatting is a little different on Google Slides. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, no, it's the slide itself. It's all right. Yeah. I'm not going to expect you to memorize all of them, and I'm going to focus on a few on the next slide, so this is okay. But he vows to do things like respect the Buddhas, praise the Buddhas, right? Which is something we do here in our temple, in our dedication, in our services, in our chanting. Right? We begin with Vandana Tisarana, which is a praise for the qualities of enlightenment. Making offerings, taking joy in the merits of others. And there's one that's not on here. Well, I'll get to it in the next slide. Right? So I want to focus on a couple of these. So as we think about bodhisattvas, right? So in the Jodo Shinshu tradition, our main practice is to think about Amida, to chant the Nembutsu, to be grateful for the presence of wisdom, the reality of wisdom in the world. When it doesn't always feel like there's wisdom in the world, we gather to remind ourselves and to have faith that wisdom is real, that it's possible for humans to act better than we do. It's possible for others to act better than we do. Bodhisattvas can be helpful. For many Buddhists in history, bodhisattvas are real powerful spiritual beings that you can make offerings to and you can request the aid of. They can also serve as exemplars and archetypes. Right? So I've given you a book recommendation. You can't really see it. It's called Faces of Compassion by Daniel Layton, who's an American Buddhist priest. And he goes through some of these bodhisattvas and he talks about their qualities. It's really inspiring. It's less dry than the talk I'm giving right now. It's very inspiring. He talks about their qualities, really brings it to our world. And he brings examples. He says, here's someone who's an example of this. He talks about Manjushri and wisdom and brings up John Coltrane, jazz musician. And in Samantabhadra, he brings up Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King. Right? Exemplars of people who are active and engaged in the world. So we live in very challenging times. Some of us face more challenges personally than others. But I think we're all aware there's a lot of changes afoot and there's a lot of challenges afoot. And people we know are under threat. So how do we live with that? What does Buddhism have to tell us about that? I would encourage folks to reflect on bodhisattvas as a general thing, as a general principle, but also in specific. What qualities do we bring to the world? What qualities do we bring to our interactions with other people in the face of challenge, in the face of the poly crisis that we're in, global climate change, rising fascism around the world? What are our reactions? So in Jodo Shinshu, we spend a lot of time rightly talking about our limitations, recognizing our challenges personally and our limits. And if you saw the full list of 10 things that Fugen says that they will do, it can get overwhelming. And I think that's one of the beauties of our tradition is like, the tradition is not saying, do this now or you suck, right? If you don't follow, if you're not exactly like Bodhisattva Fugen, instead we can take small solace in the things we can do, the things we can change. So praising Buddhas. Right? One way to think about this is not just, and some folks have challenges with this depending on your culture and religious background. You may have personal challenges praising Buddhas. But I would invite you to think about this as we are praising, again, wisdom. When we're praising Amida, we're praising what that means, right? Just that all of us have some seed of wisdom. All of us can act. All of us can make a different choice when faced with bad choices. All of us can reach out in a moment to provide some kindness. We may not be able to plan it in advance. There's something within us. There is a wisdom there. That's what Buddhahood means. In Mahayana Buddhism, Buddhahood is there, it's also here. It's also right here. Buddhahood is here. And so by praising Buddhas, we're praising that potential in ourselves and in everyone we meet throughout our days. Even the people who challenge us. So it's a practice. This is a vow of practice, not an accomplishment. Not, I nailed it every day, I'm going to nail it 100%, but how can I do this a little bit more? The second vow I want to focus on is rejoicing in the happiness of others. And in the sutra where these vows are explained, Samantabhadra talks at length that if I praise people who do this, I'm happy with people who do this. But in our modern world, right, this is a big challenge. Right? We are caught in our feelings of jealousy. Right? If one of my colleagues gets an award, I'm happy for them, and there's a little part of me that's like, why didn't I get that? Right? And that secondary voice of jealousy can really get in the way. It can make your life miserable. Right? If you're comparing yourselves to others, they have it, I don't. They have this, I don't. They accomplish this, I don't. They have this skill, I don't. They have this happiness, I don't. That can get in the way of enjoying our lives or even being able to love. So Samantabhadra's Fugen's model is practice. When others achieve something, when others attain something, when others get something, say, I am happy for them. I'm happy for them. I'm happy for you. So that's the practice. Rejoice in the happiness of others. Studying the Dharma in order to teach it. It's just in the Chinese it just says study the Dharma. I'll always say study the Dharma. But then in the explanation, Samantabhadra lays out, it's like, I'll study the Dharma and then I'll teach it. Okay. Sometimes I'll be hanging out in the retinue of a king. Sometimes I'll be hanging out with common people. Sometimes I'll be hanging out with Brahmins, people in other religious traditions. It goes through this whole list. Sometimes I'll be hanging out with these folks. Sometimes I'll be here. And in all those cases, I'll speak appropriately. I will bring the truth. So this is not an invitation to talk people down, to just blast at people, to mansplain, right? To engage in talking people down. It's always guided by wisdom. But when you have the chance to offer supporting words of guidance, take it. Because that's what the Dharma means as a whole. Benefiting all beings. Again, this is why Jodo Shinshu is really good, because Jodo Shinshu is like, you can't do that. You can't benefit all beings. We're all mortal. We're all finite. We're finite in our bodies. We're finite in the time we have on this world. Right? So we can't benefit all beings. But the mindset is there. How can we benefit beings? And in the text, Samantabhadra, Fugen, really clearly goes through, I will benefit all beings. And in very classic Buddhist scripture format, it says, all beings born from eggs, all beings born from wombs, all beings born from moisture, all beings born from transformation. It's not a biological category, it's a Buddhist category. All beings that are conscious, all beings that have thoughts, all beings that do not have thoughts. All beings that live on the earth, that live in the sky, and that live in the sea. And it goes through all beings. And so all beings that we share the world with, how can I be of benefit? What can I do? Sensei brought this up briefly last week. He said, right, it's Jodo Shinshu, we're really, we can't act like sages, all of us, but little acts of kindness, small acts of kindness. Being happy for other people, acting for the benefit of others. These are, psychology tells us these are actually the paths to happiness. Caring about what happens to others, not getting caught up in their stories, but caring about what happens to others as compassion actually can protect us from things like burnout. I'm happy to talk more about that to folks later. That's something I looked at a lot when I was working in chaplaincy work. But these are some of the things I just wanted to point out. If you have contact with other bodhisattvas through other traditions, or if you see the same figure over and over and you're like, that's cool, something in your heart. Right? If Kannon really speaks to you, if you see Kannon around, you will see them everywhere, right, if you're looking. They're quite popular in the Chinese tradition, the Vietnamese tradition. We have a lot of Vietnamese-run businesses here in this county, and a lot of folks are devoted Buddhists. Not everybody; it's not but a fair number. And so you'll see images of Kannon and others. So I would invite us all to think about that, right? And we live in difficult times. Where do we look for guidance? Right? We can look to heroes. We can look to influencers on social media. We can look to whoever the YouTube, whatever the YouTube algorithm is giving us next. I get some random stuff. I don't know about you. I don't look at a lot of YouTube, but occasionally I'll be looking at a talk from the Jodo Shinshu Center, right, from our tradition, and then the next talk will be some Christian pastor who's really famous, right? They're like, well, you're into spiritual stuff. That's not my jam. So rather than looking to whatever our culture throws at us, Buddhism has examples of figures, people who have stories, people who have engaged in practice, people who can be exemplars for us. Kakushin is a good example, Shinran's daughter. So we talked a lot about Shinran, and he's a good exemplar for our tradition, and if you want to stick with Shinran, you can. I'm not a minister, and so I can go a little outside the Jodo Shinshu orthodoxy, so I talked today about Fugen Bodhisattva. On his elephant, on their elephant. The elephant is described as walking slowly with confidence. It's not rushing, it's stately. And Fugen is sitting calmly, solemnly on top. I wish that for all of us. So please join me in Gasho. The countless great bodhisattvas of the land of happiness have reached succession to Buddhahood after one lifetime. Entering the compassionate activity of Samantabhadra, they unfailingly work to save beings in defiled worlds. Namo Amida. Namo Amida. Namo Amida.